great information for us to hear on some of the things they've done. So he doesn't have a slide presentation. He's just going to share some of the experiences and some information technically as well for you all as a part of an input, just for 5 minutes. Come on, give me a hand clap.
Hello, you guys are here doing the right thing, getting information. Because if you don't get information before you start this, you're going to be in trouble. I started this journey 3 years ago, and what you have to start right now is what's your end game? What are you getting in here for? Are you for the fiber, or are you for the CBD oil? Because you're going to have an outlet. We got in the game 3 years ago because we was doing therapeutic medicine for the veterans. We wanted to make sure that the veterans are growing good CBD products, that they're extracting good CBD products, and that we're going to eventually give the veterans good products. So that's how we got into the end game, and we've partnered up with some R&D companies in Colorado that's Native American. So they've actually been doing this a long time. So we're working with good genetics. We also partner with Dr. Jackson, the gentleman who's sitting in the back. He's from Verifarm Biopharmaceuticals, and they're doing R&D research. So we got in the game for R&D research. It wasn't about the money part for us. It was about having good therapeutic medicine. So you guys may not be in there, but that's a long story. Anyway, some of the things we experienced, one thing that we really ran into this year that you guys better not do is have an end game. There are a lot of farmers right there now that can't sell their biomass because they didn't get an end game. At the beginning of the growth season and they start harvesting, there was people that was getting $2.25 a point. I got a call the other day, people are down to 80 cents a point because they can't move it. So make sure you guys, when y'all start doing this, you have an end game. You have a buyer who's going to really, really buy this stuff. There are problems out there with co-ops that was promised a certain thing. When the market got flooded, they got nothing. Other things we've experienced out there with our different grows in different states is mold, two-dotted spider mites. So there are a lot of problems that's going to be out there that you guys really got to think through. I know everybody want to get in here and everybody make the good money game, but we're actually moving our organization not only inside the United States, but outside the United States. So be careful. How do I say this? That'd be nice. Be careful about the COAs that you see out there, okay? Because I've seen some stuff that look really suspicious. They say, we got feminized plants, 100% feminization, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Best thing I could tell you is do like I just told a company, give me a list of all your clients, let me pick the one that I want to call. Because I don't want to pick the one that's your buddy that you're going to tell them what to say. So be careful if you're going to do clones, be careful at the clones. Make sure you know that the clones that you're getting, the people that you're getting it from, is going to help you with that clone. Because each one of those produces differently. And you don't want to get stuck with something that goes hot. That was the other problem. A lot of farmers went hot this year. I know experienced farmers who's been doing this for 10 years went hot this year because they played with other genetics, other seeds. So really be careful. It's a lot out there. There's a lot of seeds. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of people that want to give you stuff. Really make sure they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Make sure they have the support that you're going to need out there because you're going to need it. And don't let no one tell you because they planted hemp in Colorado that it's going to do the same thing in Texas. It won't. Because you got to keep in mind that hemp will pull stuff out of the ground. We had an instance where a gentleman pulled zinc out of the ground on his hemp. And they grew tobacco all their life. They grew hemp, couldn't do nothing with it because it pulls stuff out of the ground. So really be careful with what your end game is and what you're getting there for. So that's my 5 minutes. But go ahead, sir. What we do is we have a geneticist on our team. So any COA, he's going to look at it. He's going to he's going to ask them all of the questions. You got to get somebody to ask them the questions that you don't know. Just by seeing the COA and they say they did something, yeah, they may have did that 10 years ago, but the whole game has changed now. So really be careful and validate everything that you get out there because there's a lot of stuff that's not going to do what they say it's going to do. It's not going to produce the same CBD oil or whatever you're getting in it for. And please don't go hot. Georgia's going to make everybody store stuff because we're actually going to come online this year. But we're actually growing in North Carolina, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and then next year it's going to be Tennessee, about 5 other states outside the United States. So we screening everybody's stuff we get this year because a lot went on out there. Destroy it. And that's going to be everybody. That's going to be controlled by the USDA. So the only way we're ever going to get around that is they're going to have to raise the limit of the THC, and they're talking about it to 5 to 1. It's eventually going to have to be raised, or a lot of people going to have a lot of problems.
So you couldn't take that hot product and settle it in a medicinal
No.
marijuana industry? Like you have to burn
They don't
it?
want you to mess with it at all, and that's what our partners in other states. They don't want you to mess with it at all. But people take it and sell it or do whatever they're gonna do with it. Sell it is. You didn't hear that from me. You didn't hear that from me. I'm sorry. You didn't hear that from me.
What what forms of support would you suggest we look for from these suppliers, like the people who provide us clones and seeds and things like that? What kind of support should we look for? Ask them about.
Your hemp organization, go investigate all these other hemp organizations out there in other states. Like right now, Colorado seems to be the leader. Okay, so that's where I would start. Colorado is actually trying to write the book on hemp for everybody. I forgot what they call it, but they're writing a big program that's eventually going to be adopted by the USDA. So I would start at Colorado, Oregon. Who else? Colorado, Oregon are the main two that I would really try to see in California, but California, they doing other things. So, last question.
Are you seeing an increase in the fiber in the fiber market in Georgia?
No, there's no fiber market really other outside of Kentucky.
Okay.
That's going to be an up and coming market because the infrastructure hadn't been set up for that yet. It's going to come, but right now it's not where it should be at.
You think for the next 5 years?
Yes, I answer that. Now I'm charging for that answer. No, because that's the way the market is going to go. What we see is eventually the CBD oil is going to actually level off 3 to 5 years. So get in this game for sustainability and start small. If you're not getting for sustainability, start small. Good luck.
All right. Thank you. Let's thank Henry for the insight he just gave us. Now, actually, we're going to have Shonda. Where's Shonda? Maybe something's happening to my eyes. You think maybe I need some medical? I'm just joking.
Good for your eyes. Is this on? Great. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. My name is Shonda Warner, and thank you, everyone, for asking me to come and share. Basically, what I wanted to do today was share all my mistakes. I have farmed pretty much my entire life on and off, corn, soybeans. Today we grow rice, blueberries, hazelnuts, oranges, and olives in various places around the United States. And we grow hazelnuts and blueberries in Oregon. And in 2018, my grandfather was a hemp farmer in the 1940s in north central Iowa, and he'd always talk to me about it. and I was in love with it. And I share a funny little weird classification with Dr. Aruna, and that we're both fellows of the Linnaean Society. It's a really weird British horticultural society. And I love weird and exotic plants, and I'd always loved hemp from being a child. So we'd followed it, and we'd gone to all the conferences in Kentucky for the last 4 or 5 years. And we're too scared to sort of get in the game and farm. But in 2018, we felt like the bipartisan support around the Farm Bill was going to happen, and it was real this time. And so we took a risk, and in 2018, we grew both X59, which is a type of fiber hemp, for the seed primarily, omega-6 and omega-3 oils. And then we grew just a couple acres of high CBD, low THC hemp for CBD, and this is in Oregon. And it was a really interesting experience, and I can talk a lot about that, and I can bore everybody for hours about all sorts of things. Another conclusion that we came to after years of farming, and I would encourage people to think about this perhaps in all different ways, is that one of the ways as farmers, it's been really, really, really horrible. Who farms out here today, by the way? Yeah, in Texas, yeah. Okay, great. So y'all know, right? I went to school in Austin. I mean, it's awful everywhere. And prices are low, and we've had a trade war with China, and bankruptcies are up across the United States in rural America and in agriculture. And so as we've farmed around the United States and looked at things, we asked ourselves, how really, I'm so sick and tired of people talking about being the difference. I don't want to be on one more advisory board, if I can help it as long as I live. Like, what can we do? And it's tough. And so one of the few, I guess, conclusions we drew was to vertically integrate some of our operations. And what that means is that instead of just being the farmer, and that's hard enough, you have to wear so many hats to be a good farmer. Instead of just being the farmer, we should perhaps add value to the crops that we grow and sell those crops direct to consumers. And thank you, consumers in this room, for having different tastes and having changing consumption patterns and demanding more nutrition from your food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Independent is the new orange or black, or however they say that saying. But all of a sudden, a lot of large food corporations like Kellogg and Nestle and General Mills are struggling because people are coming up with better and more interesting foods and challenging them. And so we decided to vertically integrate our company, or some of the things that we grow, and we saw hemp as one of the first places to perhaps launch these value-added products. Excuse me. And so that's what we did. We formed this little brand, and we're here as Pharmacopoeia. I'm here as Pharmacopoeia Farms. I wear a lot of different hats, but Pharmacopoeia has some CBD products in the marketplace. You can look online. But also, our next product will be hazelnuts, and we'll be pressing hazelnut oil. And I'll talk a little bit more as I run through this presentation about maybe how, hopefully, this crazy hemp phenomena will help change people's thoughts, maybe about diversification and what they grow and how they grow it and how they do their business overall as farmers. So anyway, what I want to do is run really quickly through this presentation. It's boring, kind of. And then I know that there's a Q&A session later, but I tend to forget questions. And so this is really about answering your questions if you're thinking about doing this and convincing you to try, but giving you enough information to help you not fail, because all of us wear lots of hats, and identity is a really fascinating subject. I'm a woman, but I think even more than being a woman, I'm a farmer. And I care really deeply that we're successful, and I think it's one of the greatest natural resources that we have to offer in our country, and I don't think that people appreciate that very much. And I want to do something about that before I go sinking down in my 6-foot hole. Hold on. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my CBD economics today, and you're going to go, wow. But where I think that the industry is going to go overall in the long term is a type of seed, and hopefully it can be developed here in part at Prairie View. You guys have the chops to do this, where we have high CBD in the leaf and the bud, the cola, but also high fiber in the stalk and fantastic attributes in the seed. And that when a farmer harvests his hemp in 5 years' time, there will be an infrastructure developed to take on board all the different pieces of this plant and really intelligently use it. We are not there today. That's what makes farming hemp slightly scary and dangerous. And so, I throw it out to a lot of business folks, a lot of people in the business community to really challenge them to help us build the infrastructure that we need as farmers to take advantage of this plant. Even if we vertically integrate, we still need infrastructure. We can't do it absolutely all. Anyway, I don't know. I'm sure that folks have talked to you. We just arrived at lunchtime, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but acreage more than quadrupled in 2019 after the Farm Bill. We were up to 520,000 acres of hemp, and I can probably guess, or my own personal opinion is that maybe 60,000 acres of that was actually planted and harvested, and of that, over half is sitting in someone's barn or has rotted in the field without a home. That is scary, okay? This is a really silly little slide, and I actually used it for another talk, and it's not that relevant, but it is relevant a little bit, and it's just the Shonda Warner opinion of where we'll be 5 years from now in the industry. Hemp is a food. It's nothing more and it's nothing less. It's probably one of the most dynamic, useful, healthy, nutritious foods that we have on the planet to choose from, but it's still just a food. And I remember looking at HEB. I went to school in Austin. I remember looking at HEB 15 or 20 years ago, and they sold hemp, and I said, oh, why can't we grow this? Where's it from? And they sold even hemp hearts back then, and of course it all came from Canada. We could sell hemp hearts in our grocery stores, but we couldn't grow it. Ooh, that upset me back that long ago. But I think that in 5 years' time, what you guys do or what we do or whoever does will eventually be in the grocery stores, right? It will be in your supermarket. It will be alongside the vitamin C. And it will be like vitamin D enhanced milk or calcium enhanced milk. We could have CBD in our milk. And that's really exciting. So I think it will become more in the mainstream. I think it will become somewhat detached from the psychoactive aspects that certain strains of this plant can have. And hopefully, that will all be legal and the whole thing will be easy for us to farm between the two places. This idea that you have to, if something tests 0.4% of THC, your entire field has to be burned and you lose all your money, that's really scary and that's super risky for us. And maybe there'll be a more elegant way to deal with it. Right now, there's not. We burn them. But I just left the slide in here to maybe stick in your head that in 5 or 10 years, this is going to be mainstream. It's real. The scientific research that's being done on the efficacy it's true, and we're going to discover a lot more things about this amazing plant that we don't know even today. So this is my truth. And I don't think I've ever told anyone my truth in this way before. So I sat down and I added up, and no one will do this for you. Like I've gone to a zillion presentations. Yeah, take pictures. And you can tell me a million ways that I am really stupid and I spent too much money. But so I grew 3 acres of high CBD hemp in 2018. And in 2019, I needed 10 to match the production goals of my little company. actually, because I did all the math and I figured out how many bottles of 1 ounce bottles of tincture equivalents that I wanted to sell. And, and I needed 10 acres, and so I decided to plant 17 acres. And that was a good thing because I've lost half of that 17. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I spent, just over $10,000 an acre doing this. And I'll tell you some things about how we feel about production. And that is we're somewhat of an artisan type of shop. And so seeds and plugs at $2 a clone, I think that that's very realistic. If you buy seed and do it yourself, it's $1 a piece. Drying, it was between $3.50 and $6.50 all over Oregon. I'm in Oregon, one of the most prolific hemp states. I think I have a good handle on that market. Weeding and staking, things fall over. Oregon, the wind doesn't blow much in the summer. I'm really worried about the wind in Texas. Nobody talks about that. These are really tall plants, and they blow over super easy. And harvesting and bucking, we harvested by hand, so it was expensive. And then you have to shuck the leaves and the cola right off the stalk. So this is, excuse me, this is an expensive plant if you want to do it this way. Lots of my friends have bean pickers. They have specialty hemp pickers. There's a million, trillion, jillion ways that we can do this, and that reduces cost as you scale up. And I think that ultimately that might be the way we go, although I would argue that you somehow kind of crush some of the trichomes and parts of the plant as you harvest them if you're not super, super careful. And then people give higher yields academically. I hope I'm not disagreeing with my beloved Peter, Dr. Apum over there, because he had, I think, a little higher yields, but our yields have been running between 800 and 1,200 pounds of dry material per acre. In 2018, the average price paid to farmers in Oregon for dried biomass was $35 a pound. That sounds like a lot of money, and it was. If you would have made $24,000 an acre if you would have gotten $35 a pound for your dried biomass. Now, we can talk about trimmed flour on the side in a minute, but in 2019, the price maybe started around $10 a pound. Right now in Oregon, there is no bid. It is not. The gentleman prior to me said 50 cents a pound. There is no bid. And so that is scary and crazy. I know people sitting on thousands and thousands of pounds of dried stabilized material, and they don't have buyers. So be careful. This whole slide is all about being careful. This is presuming a 10% CBD yield. Actually, particularly if you're harvesting mechanically, that's a very high yield. So mechanical harvesting tends, I think, there's folks out here that know better than I, maybe to be around the 4 to 6% CBD yield range. We in Oregon have some amazing seed, and we have lots of weather problems, but we have some amazing seed that tests upward of 10% with very little THC. But anyway, so all of a sudden, my 17 acres, if I would have had to sell my biomass, and thank God I didn't, but if I would have had to sell my biomass, all of a sudden I'm losing $5,000 an acre. And that's assuming, what did I do there? At $5 a pound. That's 10% quality CBD getting extracted. So I just stop there for a second, because that's a whole mouthful right there. Like, most people don't share that stuff with the audience. So does anybody have any questions about that mess? Yes, sir, in front. The Oregon seed originated in Oregon. Probably Oregon. I think it's called Oregon Hemp. Preston, do you know better than I? Oregon. No, I think he said, where did it originate from? So, yeah, I mean, it's well, there's a number of seed companies that we chose to use in Oregon. Oregon CBD is the most well-known. Juniper is a very well-known seed company. Some of it may have come from our own genetics over time prior to that. Other questions? In the back? We have a wonderful Hispanic migrant worker community, and about 5 of us can get through probably 2 acres a day, 3 acres a day. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the main factor is that the price for a dried pound of biomass went from $35 to $5. Oh, I'm sorry, supply and demand, entirely supply and demand. Yes. Yes, if we go back a couple slides, right, we see, right, that there was probably about 120,000 acres grown in 2018, and that jumped to over 500,000 acres for 2019. Yes, it's an inverse price relationship. Supply and demand, economics, rules for everything that we will do in our lives as farmers. Yes, sir. You know what? Legislation has nothing to do with this. No one can save my butt. I have to be smart, right? And so we could legalize marijuana. I personally think that that will happen in the United States in the next 5 to 10 years, but that will not save us as farmers from being stupid and growing too much, right? The price is going to go down. If you look at THC prices, you will see that I don't follow them that closely, but something like $2,000 a pound down to $400 or $300 a pound. Is that about right? Yeah, depending on state and all that kind of thing. Yes, sir. No, I think that because it's a federal market now, that it is a federal issue. Hemp is moving like crazy from our state and from Colorado to all the other states in the U.S. So I think that when we think about it, I don't personally think about it as a state factor. I think about it as a federal factor, and we actually, amongst my many hats I've worn in my life, I was a Goldman Sachs proprietary trader for a few years, and so I'm okay with my statistics and economics, and so we get data sets of statistics just because I'm curious and kind of idiot geeko. Yes, sir. No, I don't. It's a supply and demand issue. It's an economics issue. So the federal government, the gentleman behind you asked if, yes, he asked if it's a problem with how many licenses that were given out in Oregon. And my response is, it's not about Oregon. It's in a number of federal licenses to grow hemp given out in the U.S. Yes. Yeah, no, the fiber market is like $50 a ton. And that's if you get somebody to bid for your stalks. I had maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 ton of stock left over after we bucked everything, and I couldn't get anybody to come even pick it up for free. So it is, it just degrades, right? It's biodegradable. It degrades into the soil. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. It's in, well, we farm, we have 5 farms in Oregon, and amongst all those different crops, and they basically run between Salem and Albany, just to the east of I-5. Oh, cool. Oh, mhm. Cool.
Different thing, when you have the relationships with industrial, the biomass. Texas is different than Oregon. We're a lot more liberal. We're more so on a retail level.
Texas or Oregon?
Oregon.
Oregon's liberal, yes.
So, but I'm saying with Texas, the goal is you want to know who you're selling it to first. So Texas has, I think, a gold mine to say industrial is the way to go, because you have farmers that have legacies and generations of farming experience, but not so much on a small scale. So if farmers here are going to do it, I encourage farmers here to do it in a greenhouse level. That's most important, because the inclement weather, the alkaline, the sodium in the soil, it's a whole different animal compared to Oregon.
Yeah, and I think
so
different parts of
different.
Texas, it's like, 5 or 6 countries in this crazy state.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and
you know,
like Ms. Hannah was saying earlier, that industrial side, the fiber, is amazing, for here in Texas.
it
to
is,
say.
but we need infrastructure to
Right.
be able
It's
to
just
use our
the reason I said,
biomass.
because it's that
That's the
supply
big
and
issue.
demand. It's that supply and demand of what you were saying.
Anybody else?
And I want to let me make this statement. This is how she likes her presentation: interaction with questions. That's why I'm allowing it to occur.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody? Sorry. So we planted 17 acres in this year, and we will plant 8 acres next year. So I'm going to cut my acreage back. I think we'll be able to fulfill all the demand of our product, and just sort of watch a little bit. Yes, sir. We had an unusual, unexpected rain the 3rd week of September, and the whole state molded over. And so I lost part of the crop due to mold. Yes, sir. I have to very respectfully slightly disagree. And the reason is that we in the United States have lots of water and land, and China might have a lot of acres, but they're dirty. And they have terrible, terrible problems, and they can't feed themselves. We can feed ourselves. And guess what? Not only can we feed ourselves, we have to export to hold up the price of all of the agricultural commodities that we grow in the United States. And so I don't want to piss anyone off in Asia, right, by telling them that they can't, that we won't buy their product, because that's what just happened, and then they didn't buy our product. And we need them. Let's not be foolish. This is a one small world. We need them to buy U.S. agricultural produce. And so I think that we have to get smart, and it's going to be really hard. Farming sucks, man. It's tough. we have to be really, really smart and figure out how to use the whole plant as quickly as possible. And then we can't be greedy because, like when I grow soybeans, if I have $300 or $400 an acre profit, I'm jumping up and down clapping. If this is $450 an acre, we should all be happy. And so folks that think that they're going to get that 2018 number of $20,000 an acre, right? I did it on 2 acres. Whoopee-doo-dah, right? Like nothing. That's an unrealistic expectation. And so I think that we have to keep an open global world myself, but everybody's got different opinions. So these are all the problems, and I'm sure that there's a, yes, ma'am. Yes. Plants out of the field, totally, and get high. Sorry, I'd love to hear her. Yeah, I guess, yeah. Or they're going to steal our plants and plant them in their own fields. Woo! There's that game too. We don't have wild hogs. We have really hungry bird and deer. Yeah, nutria, all those good guys. We don't have the wild hogs that the Mid-South and Texas have. No. But you know what, like everybody, even from the top sellers, the fancier than fancy folks, they had males in their plant, right? They have males in their feminized seed. Everybody had seed in their crop. And so we need to think about that as well. And the gentleman who spoke briefly before me was talking about COAs and things. I don't have a way to protect ourselves. Actually, we'll be donating a lot of our seed to Texas A&M Prairie View on April 5th or whatever day they can take it, in hopes that the research will be done by our good friends here, and some better seed will be developed, but that's going to take a little while. Hang on one second. What other things? Windstorms. Yeah, mold. That was horrible. Lots of. I spent $10,000 from Jupiter Seed, and not one single seed sprouted, and I had no recourse. That was fun. No insurance. Right, this is the first year that the insurance program is in place, and it's unclear if it protects a CBD type of P&L. Yeah. Sorry. I just want to say something. You guys are really uniquely placed here at Prairie View. You have a bunch of land that most universities would kill for. And I want to see that land used for research, and I want to see the East Texas folks get wealthy. And so this makes my heart, and that I'm a plant kind of geeky person, but this makes my heart get interested in everything else. And did everyone in this room, did y'all know that cannabinoids, which are in hemp, which everybody's talking about, are in echinacea flowers, right? Daisies, chocolate. Of course, we love chocolate. This is why. Black pepper, right? And so we, Texas, you guys have the weather to grow a lot of really cool stuff. And people just need to get empowered a little bit. You need to find out who's buying things, and we need to use the internet to better connect each other to people who are buying things. I'm on the board of a company, we grow indigo in Tennessee, the first commercial growers of indigo in the United States since 1850. It's called Stony Creek Colors. You can grow that in Texas, and we need to be getting you guys growing indigo. And all of those crops, are unique. If you plant too many of them, the P&L will go down. It's not attractive. But as small holders in East Texas compared to, we had a 17,000 acre farm a few years back in Dalhart, Texas, with 77 pivots on it. Ugh. And, as a small 100, 200 acre farmer, these kind of specialty crops are super, super interesting. And the market, finally, consumers are coming in line and desiring these crops. I'm probably way over my time. But so, I mean, I've probably painted a little bit of a negative picture, and I wanted to. I don't want anybody to go. We've had 12 suicides amongst the hemp farming community in Oregon this year because people bet everything and lost it all. And I don't want that to happen in Texas. So I just brought back my first slide to sort of reiterate how exciting this plant is. But just do a little bit, play with it, right? Do not bet your ranch. Have a buyer in place. Everyone's going to tell you that who's ever dealt with this stuff, right? Before you plant your first seed. And have contracts. Do not believe people. There are so many bullshit shysters in this business. It's crazy. And get your drying and storage in place. The infrastructure's off 1 second. And then be mentally prepared. Whatever you invest, be mentally prepared to lose it all. Because that can happen right now with this crop. It's too young and too undeveloped, sir. Yes. So I'll tell you a couple things. One is we bought our own. We own a CO2 extractor. We extract it and we sell it. I think, and this is going to be a really outrageous thing, and I'm sure I'm going to get really ticked in the head, particularly by Dr. Parks when I finish, but I think that the co-op system in the U.S. is broken. I could give a whole talk on that. We just lost the last co-op in the Northwest called NORPAC. It was the fruit and vegetable packer in Oregon, bankruptcy again. Greed probably got the best of people. And so right now, when I talk about, even like with 3 or 4 or 5 farmer friends, and I'm a girl and I'm the outsider, and so that's always difficult, but like, let's get together and buy this piece of equipment. Ooh, everybody's scared of everybody else. And so if you can get the juju aligned, right, to get people to work together to do that, it would be a great thing. And there are some really wonderful co-op models. I think the most successful in the United States is actually the largest sourdough bread company in San Francisco. And that they have new twists, they have ways to have equity, they have things that a lot of the big, huge Midwestern co-ops don't have. And they get stuck and stultified, and new blood can't come in, and then people get greedy and it sort of stops working. And so I don't know, but I can tell you that people seem leery. It would have cut back on some of the problems, and it would have if we go back. When I did the numbers on, we actually have a couple big greenhouses. It would have taken my total cost from $10,000 an acre up to about $28,000 an acre. There's a problem. That is actually probably producing at a density, who knows, right? That's maybe 30% higher in the greenhouse. Because you can control and shove the plants closer together. Mm-hmm. A little bit, but that doesn't matter when the colas are mature. They're mature. Sure. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's if you amortize over 10 years. $300,000 you spend on your greenhouse, blah, 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 and your systems, et cetera. Anybody else? Yes, sir. So we tried all different things. We priced drying machines, and I didn't have an extra $270,000 to spend on a drying machine this year, so that went out the window. And so we split our drying this year between a dryer where we paid $4 a pound, and then taking our greenhouse that we built because we thought we were going to use it, and didn't, taking our greenhouse and hanging all of our plants up in our greenhouse and drying them that way. And weirdly, we're going to just do it ourselves this year. Oh, Stony Creek Colors, just north of Nashville. Oh, yeah, I don't even have agronomy up there. The price is going up. The testing procedure is that you can test as much as you want. We use Greenleaf Labs based in Portland. I think they just got a huge new certification that they can test for shipping overseas. But what this year you had to do is 30 days out, you had to go into the field and test your plant, right? And whatever results were there were the results that the USDA was going to, or your state, the ODA in our case, Oregon Department of Ag, were going to go on. And so everybody plays games about making sure that it's the 30th day out, so everything's low. By the time you get there, it's higher, et cetera. The weather was fascinating on that. But that's going to change this year because the USDA came out with a new set of guidelines that's 15 days. And so that's going to change things a little bit. But the standard knowledge that we thought we had from 2018 wasn't what we really had. And that was that things were going to go up in those 30 days. And in fact, what we saw with the weather problems that we had in late September was our latest field went down. We tested at 7% CBD going at 30 days out, and below 3 non-detectable THC. And by the time we came out, what we had was 4%. So weather is everything with this crazy plant. Yes, sir. So I think probably maybe 40% bud, and the rest leaf. Well, if it's all bud, but you can't grow a plant with all bud. Yeah, but then we could add a lot more to my cost there because the trimming, to have it trimmed, is $10 to $20 a pound, depending upon who does that for you. Some people harvest just the bud. For us, no, because we're processing our own material. And so I don't sell, and plus, I'm really sorry because I know I'm going to offend a bunch of people in the room, but I think this is such a great plant. We do not need to be ruining our lungs by putting it in there. And so it bugs me to sell smokable flower. And there's no reason, if you trim your buds, they are for smoking. There's no reason to trim your buds otherwise. Yeah, it goes way up, but it's still down overall based if I extract my leaves and my bud together, I have more oil at the end of the day. I have a lower rate. I have 12% on my buds and 5 or 6% on my leaves, but my leaves plus my bud equal more oil than if I just extracted my bud. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can. That's not a weird question at all. In 2018, we actually played around because we were just experimenting, and we drilled. We took this old drill planter and we drilled between our hazelnut trees. We had some baby hazelnut trees and used our hemp as a cover crop. So we harvested the hemp for the seed, and then we plowed everything under. It's good. It's a great idea. I personally think, so right now, distillate, I think, is trading on the market. Last year in 2018, it was around $4,000 a kilo for maybe 60 or 70% pure oil. Today, it's $250 a kilo. Okay? And so I don't think that $250 a kilo oil, should that price hold, will allow the average person to grow it in a greenhouse. If you're a specialty and you're doing something unique, or you have THC in a legal state, or whatever you're doing, then you have to tend those plants with loving care. But $250 a pound, or sorry, a kilo oil just probably doesn't allow the costs associated with greenhouse growing. If that changes, then yes. Anybody else? Yes, sir. I said what? Yes, it has. Huge. Yes, smokable bud. Yeah, it is. It's true, sir. Yeah. Yes. It's $125, and so I love my tester. I'm going to his wedding in a few weeks, and so he just drops out every couple weeks, and we see something weird, like we're trying out something that smells nice, and we want it sampled or whatever, and it's not the end of the world to spend that on a test, but a lot of people much larger than we are buying equipment. And we've got our eye on a few used things that if they should pop up into the market, we'd probably grab. Yes, sir. Burning it in the field. Yes, there's remediation, but it's very expensive. Again, with $250 a kilo oil, it's hard to pay $40 an extra pound to remediate that. We didn't need testers to catch the molds. I mean, we walked in the field, so we did not harvest a lot of crop with mold on it. It's just sitting in the field. And in Oregon, it rains all the time, and so it's so wet. Stop. Okay. It rains all the time, and so we will burn it as soon as it dries off in the spring. But anything that, actually, there are some professors here at Prairie View that can give instruction on how to remediate mold out of winterized oil. You guys, thank you so much. I'm around the rest of the day. Holler with questions.
That's good. Anytime I get bent out, I just make adjustments. These were some great questions, and this was a great conversation. And you're here to get questions to be answered. So I'm also willing, if there's some additional questions that need to be asked of her, I'm still willing to allow that to occur, because you're here to have your questions answered, most importantly. And we can't get this kind of resource of information. Because if you call me and ask me some questions, I'm going to tell you what she said. I'm going to replay it, and I tell you what she said. But I can only tell you what she said. She's telling what she has experienced. Now, she also stole my thunder. I said I was going to ask you all, how many in here are farmers? How many of you have farmed? Because, farming is work. And all of this is about farming. And if you have not farmed, I need for you to go into your pocket and make an investment to Purdue University so we can do research and be pioneers to help this change. But it's about farming. And so I'm willing to allow that, but if you don't have any questions for her, she's here. This is great information. And hopefully that when Preston come up, he's going to come up and he's going to share the economic elements that you need to be very aware of. And hopefully when he's done, we have time, we can have some more additional question and answers, and so we can take care of that, because I want you to leave here having your questions answered, at least having some idea about what to expect, okay? Go ahead and ask your question. He asked me about the 125. Come on over, Shonda. Let me walk up. Let me do my job. Walk up with the mic.
Testing. Hello, everyone. Dr. Elias Jackson, Vera Farm Biopharmaceuticals. I just wanted to get an understanding of the testing,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of farmers in here, and when you embark on this investment, this is a serious business. So I kind of wanted to get an idea exactly what this tester is doing for you, and
Sure.
and what is the cost associated with it? Because I think everybody in here needs to understand this process is resource intensive. It's going to cost a lot of money, and testing is going to be critical. And that testing is not just consumables; it goes all the way into industrial products as well.
Yeah.
So quality is important. So could you please just give us an overview of your experience and what this particular tester is doing for you?
Well, I mean, testing's everything, and testing prices run from, I can get a quick R&D test done for $75. That's going to give me potency, CBD levels, and THC. Then I can look at all the cannabinoids. But guess what? I mean, I think Aruna had to do a lecture. Oh, Aruna's back. Aruna, how many cannabinoids? I love this man. How many cannabinoids do you believe are in a hemp plant that aren't discovered yet? This is really interesting.
Actually, there are more to discover. About 400, 500 more. Because now the thing is, technology is developing so that you can enhance your screening abilities. So there are a lot of new compounds, new cannabinoids coming out.
So you guys, when I test, the fanciest lab that I know of in the US can test 14. So he's saying there's 450. This is a sort of like a testimonial for why you need broad or full spectrum oil. But anyway, it's like, not that much. If you want to do solvents or toxins and things, it's $300 or $400 more per test. Although you don't need to do those quite as often, you might do those once a year. And so there's a whole range of tests that are available, and there's probably, I don't know, Preston probably has a better idea, like what, 100, maybe 60 reputable labs around the US?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Shonda. And you're right. The testing can get very high. If you're buying them in bulk, let's say, then they could easily exceed $400 a test. If you're going for the mycotoxins, the heavy metals, pesticides, everything. Shonda's correct. You obviously don't need to test for that until you get to certain intervals. In terms of the processing. I'll just jump into it. For those of you who weren't here in the morning, and those of you who were, this is going to be a little bit repeating in terms of introduction. Thank you all. My name is Preston Gardner. I'm a research analyst for CVC Partners, as well as a fund called Alinga Capital that's based out of La Jolla, California, and I'm actually based out of San Diego, California. Born and raised here in Dallas. All of my father's family is from here. mother's family are farmers from up north. How I got into the industry, just really quick, is actually a health issue. 5 years ago, so I had been with a mutual fund coming out of college. I got my MBA, and then I worked for an institutional bank, and they were merged with another bank. And so then I got some experience on the retail side. Then I worked for an insurance company, mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, and then with CVC Partners, been with them for about 10 years. And I've covered media and entertainment, oil and gas, alternative energies, and now cannabis. So I experienced a health issue. I was in Europe for a time a few years ago, and and then I came back, and I had a health issue. My appendix burst, and I was prescribed opioids. I tried that. It wasn't a good experience. Then, I had another health issue. I had some polyps on my stomach and intestines, and so that's been surgically corrected. But my surgeon oncologist, they talked to me about, this was I was repurposed or repositioned back in Boston. This was back in 2015. And my surgeon had brought up to me about various pain management regimens. And one of them, they had just started their medical program. So, that this was medical cannabis, and I have used cannabis products. I continue to use cannabis products, and it's improved the quality of my life. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to affect everybody in that way, but it is now time for us to step forward and say we do use these products. It has helped our lives, okay? So, this is about activism, but this is about understanding the business of hemp, okay? And this is why I'm so proud to support Texas Hemp Harvesters Association, because our message is no acre left unaccounted for. So many, you've heard this all day long. We know about the bad side of this. So in terms of partnering with educational institutions, okay, like Prairie View A&M, okay, for example, really understanding the research and development, or the research into the efficacy. We're talking about bioavailability on the health and wellness side, but we're also talking about, going back to the gentleman's question before, you're talking about what is the future certificates of analysis, okay? So, and we'll be going into that, but, and I'm going to be kind of rocketing through some of this material. We have limited time, so, if we could, I will address all your questions at the end, but, in terms of the industry overview, what Commissioner Sid Miller was discussing was essentially 3 points. We've been through this in terms of finding a buyer, developing good professional relationships, and then obviously understanding, what is the supply chain going to look like, and you want to be fiscally responsible. So, I just kind of want to give you an industry overview. We understand what's happening with the publicly traded securities. So the fund that I work for, they have two parts to it. It's an equities trading division and a commodities trading side. Now, as of Q2 last year, we have been minimizing and unwinding some of our positions in the legally traded cannabis sector, okay? But they're still privately held companies. I'm also an attorney, so I've structured certain supply chains, multi-state operators, as well as a small portion of an international supply chain. I don't mind going into that. It is very difficult, though, if we're talking about exporting or importing material. It's very, very difficult. We might not get to that today, but we do have to understand the supply and demand aspect of this. But we also have to understand, how is Texas going to impact this industry? And then, of course, how is the flower, how is the product going to impact Texas? Ultimately, we must create consumable intellectual property in order for these corporations to invest in the research and development or the perpetuation of your respective entities, okay? So, it's kind of interesting to understand where Texas stands. We understand cattle and cotton, okay? So, these particular products, or we talk about commodities, we talk about either agricultural or otherwise, they're traded on organized physical trading exchanges. So what we're at a loss for is enough information to understand what is the fair market value of this particular product. So, understanding these initiatives and where are the best places to grow in the state of Texas and what grows best. We've been discussing this. So, I think, education is going to be key. There's essentially, 4 ways that we can kind of look at how can we partner with these educational institutions. No acre left unaccounted for means that if we are donating material or if we are creating some sort of agreement between an educational institution and a corporate entity to, let's say, understand what the fiber is going to look like from a yield point and we're also talking about tensile strength. So that's sort of the future certificate of analysis for the fibrous portion, because it's going to be woven into certain composites, okay? So understanding these, well, first off, let's kind of start off with these per acre estimates. And Shonda, you know, it was fantastic with the numbers that she provided. You know, University in Kentucky, they did a CBD plastic culture study. So now this was back in really, you know, and now 2019, these are really, you know, 2018 numbers based on, if you're looking at here, if we're looking at, you know, 1,500 plants per acre, $5 each. So, you know, obviously we have to think about what are our forecasts, what are our estimates for the incoming, or we'll say the foundational genetic material. The state of Texas is going to be importing material here, okay, whether that's seeds or transplants, clones, and then we're going to be growing our own. And then eventually we'll either grow our own seed or we'll continue to import. But we have to know first what grows best, and then what can we grow here on our own so that we can create these Texas hemp varietals, okay? So, you know, but these are estimates, you know, and so to understand if you're going to make that per acre, well, these are no longer the same numbers. So let's continue to look at Kentucky, for example. Unfortunately, there's some publicly traded companies out there that one of the reasons why their stock price is going down is because they're not able to obviously satisfy supply and demand, but it's really difficult to contract when you don't have a fair market value for the underlying material. Absent of physical trading exchange, akin to, let's say, oil and gas, trades in Cushing, Oklahoma, okay? For some reason, human beings have to see that someone is shaking hands, signing on the dotted line, paying money, and taking away barrels of oil. There's livestock auctions, I'm sure you're all aware of. So these livestock auctions, though, especially in the cattle industry, I'm sure you understand, they're starting to dwindle. It's hard or it's difficult for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to really place future or actually write futures contracts for these particular cattle, because let's say if it's collapsing to, or let's say it's going down to about $1.15 or $1.14 a pound for cattle, well then that's where we need to kind of start looking, well, what is the futures price of this? How we relate that to hemp? Well, we're still at this point where we don't know how to contract into the future because we don't know what we're producing today, okay? So really trying to understand what is the fair market value of this. It arrives when we're able to create consumable intellectual property to where we can bolster the prices of these particular materials. So essentially what we're looking at right here is you're going from 16,000 acres to 60,000 acres. That's exactly what we've been talking about. The acreage per state has increased considerably. What we don't want is the state of Texas to start farming a lot or allocating a lot of your cultivable acreage to something that we don't know where it's going to go, where it's going to be purchased by. So this is Kentucky, and one major publicly traded company today is filing for bankruptcy, and they're based out of Kentucky. It's one of those sad stories where they essentially get lines of credit, okay, and there's a few publicly traded companies that have hundreds of millions of dollars in these credit facilities or revolvers. Essentially, they're taking from the credit, and they believe that if their stock price increases over time, then they can sort of refinance that debt. But if it goes down, well, then we have a problem. So then they can't, then their annual interest payments alone could be more than, let's say, their EBITDA or their earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So we look at 2018 here, and we see how it's, okay, well, there's a few processors, and there's, several counties with production. Well, now we go to 2019, and we see how it's, just within 1 year, So this is something we want to avoid in the state of Texas, unless we're talking about responsible economic development. Yes, we do need processors located centrally according to a certain group of growers, but we have to understand supply and demand. Now, legislation, it's key from the perspective that we have to understand how can we invest in this industry legally. Okay, we can talk about the SAFE Banking Act. We may not have time. Secure and fair enforcement. If we're talking about sort of that three-headed monster, which is descheduling, legalization, okay, decriminalization, that's something that most likely won't be tackled until you get a second-term president. I know that there's, some more liberal candidates that say they're going to take care of it in the first term. It's a very, very difficult, monster to try and slay in your first term. So, if it's a second term type of issue, then it could be within the next 2 to 3 years that we start to see some meaningful legislation in terms of how money can flow into the industry legally, and then we can start to form some more of these supply chains. But we have to know what is it that we're consuming and what is it that we're trying to build with these fibers. If we're talking about hempcrete, for example, well, this has to go through certain certification processes to be used as construction materials, okay? It has to be tested and tested and tested again, okay? So again, this central message, of course, is research and development. Now, in terms of the types of educational partnerships to create this consumable intellectual property, there's essentially 4 ways that we can all think about how we're going to partner. The quickest and simplest way to think about it is it's either a short-term or a long-term relationship, and you're either closely connected with the company or the funding institution, or you're not closely connected. So it's almost viewed from an employee-employer perspective or an independent contractor perspective. So, and so these are just kind of, names for, so Ideal Laboratory, essentially it's more of a short-term relationship and you're not closely connected. So meaning a company like, HP Labs or, IBM's, what they might do is they might contract out with certain people and then they create, intellectual property and they don't necessarily have access to that. It's just sort of a one-off, okay? Well, all right. Well, then we go to more of a grand challenge. It's just a longer-term relationship. You're trying to you're usually on a project basis for, let's say 6 to 9 months or more. And in this case, in hemp, on the fibrous side, for example, we talked about tensile strength and yield point. That just means that these tensometers basically pull it, and then when they let go of it, then, does it create deformities, okay? And if it does, well, then that's sort of a point that we need to think about. Once it shows deformities or little microscopic abrasion, and then it tears apart. And then we need to know how strong it is when it actually tears apart. And what'll happen is they'll weave these into certain designs, and then it'll look like a composite that is meant to rival graphene and Kevlar. Okay, now when that happens, which we're still many years away, then it also, if we're talking about body armor, then we're talking about military aerospace defense applications, but it still has to go through significant certification until it achieves the National Institute of Justice mark, okay? Now once that happens, it's very similar to what happened with the Kevlar, and then the government came in and then they established certain contracts. But at the end of the day, we have to create the same fiber over and over again, and most likely it will be a combination of sustainable fibers. Because of the agricultural nature of this particular product, it's going to be difficult to replicate unless we're using the same or relatively similar genetic material harvest after harvest after harvest. So we're just understanding consistency. All right, so oh yes, so this is an example of the Structural Genomics Consortium. So they're partnering with several universities, and then with those partnerships comes Pfizer, Novartis. Okay, so there is going to be a side of this that is going to be biopharmaceutical, then there's going to be a side of it that's material sciences, okay? So kind of thinking about these projects, this is another reason why we're honored to be here, is because Texas A&M, or A&M Prairie View is what we're talking about, is that they do have the facilities and the resources to execute these types of research initiatives. So, I think that it's important for us to understand what are our capabilities to research, and then what is it that we're interested in, and how does that apply to the products, or in this case, the fiber that we're going to be cultivating here. So. And then, extended workbench, these, again, this is more short-term, but it's on the path to possibly being an employee of these particular companies. So, and that can be exciting for some people who are thinking sort of a long-term type of, career move to where they could sort of go half and half with education and more on research, and then, have those benefits of being closely connected with that particular entity. And then finally, deep exploration, we're talking about a long-term, closely connected type of program. These types of agreements are possible because here with hemp, it is going to take several years for us to research this. It's going to have to be harvest after harvest so that we can see consistency. And we're going to be splicing and combining some genetics together to just simply make it stronger, faster, right? All right, so now, corporate partnerships is what we're talking about, is incremental integration, okay? Now, vertical integration is possible, but it is very difficult, okay, especially as you're scaling up operations. So to contract that entire supply chain into perpetuity beyond a year is something that can be very difficult, but it's not impossible. It's more quality management and supply chain management, relationship management, right? So we understand that, but just simply talking about it is very very difficult to put into practice. So now the intellectual property, this is something that in the fibrous world is going to take some time. So trying to understand that we are trying to put people to work, okay? We're trying to get people jobs. We're trying to get them paid in this industry. So that's the goal of all this, is to develop something that a company can buy and replicate and continue to sell, okay? So proper incentivization along the supply chain, properly incentivizing each node or each link in the supply chain is very important. So if you're talking about quality, well, then we need to incentivize that once somebody rises to the level of being able to consistently produce a certain quality, well, then they should be rewarded for that. And then that will incentivize a greater quality product to continuously be created. So now this is responsible economic development. This is what we're talking about here in Texas and with Texas Hemp Harvesters Association, is really understanding how can we grow this without overextending ourselves. Okay, how can we gradually and incrementally pivot some of our crop to hemp? How could we, for example, in the cattle industry, could we sequester some of our cattle, maybe a small percentage, and just feed them the hemp feed? And let's study it. So, it's great that there are products to purchase and there's foundational material all over this country. There's going to be people from other states that are going to come and they're going to try and sell us seed. So we have to do our due diligence and we have to understand, what is our supply chain going to look like in the future once it becomes developed, okay? How is it going to look? Is it going to take on more of an oil gas model, okay? So if we're talking about extracting for oil, then it might look like sort of, downstream, midstream production, okay? But most likely we're going to be dealing with more of an agricultural supply chain model, which is relatively straightforward and something that all of you are familiar with, okay? So this is not an impossible thing to do, but if you're gradually and incrementally using it as either a rotational crop to clean up your soil, or if you're trying to really grow the strongest fiber that you can, well, okay, then it's a relatively straightforward supply chain. But we are going to be contracting with states surrounding Texas for the foreseeable future, but it doesn't have to be into perpetuity, because we have to grow our own material. We have to see, what seeds can we all create, or, what are the fibrous material going to look like a year from now, 3 years from now? Okay, and then, so we talk about vertical integration. We understand what that looks like, but once you're getting all the way to the retail side, it gets kind of dicey in terms of the taxation. Okay, if we talk about legislation, for example, if you want to talk about California, they've sort of overreached with their taxation. Certain links in the supply chain, once you're getting closer to the retail side, they feel they're being taxed greater than 51 cents on the dollar. Now, most likely it's more around the 40%, but anything greater than, let's say 25 to 30% taxation across the board is going to be really tough due to the fact this is an emerging industry. So, now, and again, what we're talking about is valuation and due diligence. So a gentleman asked before, he said, what kind of protection how can we protect ourselves? Well, whoever you're going to do business with, if it's possible for you to go on the premises, to go to the farm, to actually interview these people, see who their business partners are. We're doing our due diligence to understand what is the value of not only each component in our supply chain, but of the supply chain of our potential partners. We need to do our due diligence, okay? So, however you can vet, okay, your suppliers, we understand how to do that, but we need to see, well, how long have they been growing? What types of varietals have they experimented with? What have their offtake agreements look like? There's a few different types of agreements, and I'll see if I have this in here, but in fact, it's in the next one here. These are actually numbers from Hemp benchmarks. So the fund that I work for has taken a strategic position in New Leaf Data Services, which owns cannabis benchmarks and hemp benchmarks, transparent price reporting services. So again, we're talking about in the absence of a true futures and forwards market, because we don't have a regulated physical exchange, and we're going to need several physical exchanges to really understand the data. Now, there have been efforts in a few states to establish these physical trading exchanges, but absence any kind of enforcement or regulation, then unfortunately we still don't really know what is the fair value of this particular product. What we really want to look at, and what we were talking about before, is these industrial seeds. We want to take a look at the CBD seed and crude hemp oil, things of that nature. Now these are for actual executed deals. So we see that there is a level of price compression. We understand that. But, how is it going to look in the future a few years from now if people are continuing to increase the number of acreage? So if we're going beyond 500,000, are we going to get to 1 million next year? Well, obviously we don't want that to happen unless demand and supply are correlated, okay? Or at least if there's some sort of protection on the price side. And we can go into subsidies, but it's really difficult. So, in terms of the types of agreements that we're going to be creating, it's important to look at purchase agreements, which were significantly in greater quantity and frequency 3 to 4 years ago relative to, let's say, last year, okay? So most of the agreements that I have structured is on the payment, or let's say payment in kind or tolling relationships. Okay, so, and I call it tolling the dominoes, because if all of these dominoes are set up and then they fall down, okay, the way they should, then everybody for the most part gets paid. So let's say that the cultivator says, okay, hey, I'd like to go to a buyer and I want the buyer to pay money for this product. So it's a spot trade, here, let's go, I got the material for you and I want the cash. Now, let's say back in 2016, 2015, those deals were probably around 50% of the overall market, and the institutional wholesale market was maybe around 10 to 15%, because it was just a small market. Now the institutional wholesale market, according to cannabis benchmarks, they believe it to be less than 7%. I believe it's probably less than about 5% of the overall market. And then, of course, we have to think about what is the definition of an institutional wholesale buy. So that quantity has decreased year to year, okay? So you have spot trades that are just upfront, cash for product. Those are very rare. Most likely it's a payment in kind, meaning you strike a deal with your processor, your extractor, and they say, well, I don't have all the money right now. I can give you a percentage of it. Or, it's essentially on consignment, where they basically give the product to you, then they'll transform it and add value, and then hopefully they'll sell it down the line. Or if they don't sell it, then let's say it goes to a white label, or in this case, it might go to an extractor, okay? And they kind of set up a similar deal. And then it goes to a white label, and then it gets to the retail. And they're hoping that the consumer will purchase that product, and then when they purchase it, then one domino goes down, and then everybody can kind of get paid from that point. Unfortunately, if one domino falls out, then suddenly who is the likely party that's going to be marginalized? Most likely it's the farmer, okay? So this is something that we want to avoid in this state. So individuals, that like Shonda, thank you so much for her experience. She comes from Goldman Sachs, and now she literally bought the farms, right? And she's contributing to this industry. That's what we need more of. We need people who are highly intelligent, they have a lot of business experience, and then they do this, and then they're willing to teach us and say, hey, these are the mistakes that we made. Because it's not necessarily mistakes, it's just we're all going through this growing process. This is an emerging infant industry. If we believe in the efficacy of this particular plant, from the health and wellness and from the material sciences side, then we have to be willing to take a long-term economic approach to this, okay? We may be bearish short-term with this industry. That just means that maybe Texas is entering this industry at the perfect time because other states have made mistakes. There's bankruptcies after bankruptcies. We don't want that here, okay? So maybe Texas is perfectly positioned because we will have no acre left unaccounted for. So, these types of offtake agreements and these splits, they can be very, very dangerous, very risky. So always understand, what is the fair market value? How can we protect ourselves? Now, in the absence of that forwards and futures, we can create contracts, and I have, that sort of mimic that, but there's certain price stabilization collars that are pegged to comparable agricultural products like wheat and barley, for example. But again, we have to understand, what is the credit risk and what's the counterparty risk? There's significant risk here, okay? So this is something for all of us to take into consideration. All right. And, final thoughts, given my time or whatnot, we understand this industry is evolving, right? We're at the infant stages, okay? Education is very, very important. Connecting with your educational institutions that have the capacity, like A&M Prairie View, the capacity to conduct these types of research and development initiatives and partner with corporate entities that have the ability to fund these operations is something that will jumpstart the industry, okay? We have to have something to sell, and then we have to be able to create it again and then sell it again. All right, and then that kind of flows through into corporate sponsorship. Two areas, okay? Supply chain management and quality management are two main issues about this, especially if we're talking about the CBD side or the health and wellness side. That may be the higher margin product, okay? But fiber and the material sciences, once we understand the efficacy and we're able to create these composites, that's something that's going to change things, okay? Now, and then finally, understanding what is the value of the operation that you're doing business with. Do your own due diligence. To a certain respect, all of you who are farmers, you know how to walk onto a property and say, well, I kind of know what this is worth. I understand what the value of the land is. I understand what the irrigation is. I understand what the soil quality is. What's the value of the property? Okay, what are the surrounding properties worth? We understand that, but then when we're incorporating hemp as either a rotational crop or some sort of revenue-generating crop, then we have to think, well, for example, if cotton futures are at 70 cents a pound, well, all right, if the cotton farmer might be able to realize, $100 to $300, $400 per acre, well, if you're going to incorporate 5% at most of your crop into hemp, how is that diversification? How is that going to affect your bottom line? So it's something that's very, very important for you to reach out and to find people who have this information and glean from them the knowledge that you can to mitigate your risk, okay? Now, in absence of federal regulation, we must regulate ourselves. So, and as a closing thought, it's such a privilege to be here with all of you today. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Please speak with Hannah. Please speak with Andrew. Please speak with any of us at Texas Hemp Harvesters Association, and we'll be happy to help you in any way that we can. So thank you so much. Thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. So this is the time that we'll have questions and answer period. So I was going to ask them who are here to come on back. I mean, you can stay up here, Preston. Hannah, Dr. Parks, Aruna, Dr. Aruna. Dr. Aruna. You look at, come on now. Dr. Aruna saying, Dr. Bunch, you stopped me when I was in my groove earlier. Yeah, I ain't going to let you do it to me twice. I know. Just. Hold on.
What's your question, man? Go ahead, please. Sorry.
Well, I heard earlier that applications for license start March 1st. Is your recommendation you apply for the license and figure out what you're later? Or, when does the license get you if you're not ready and there's so much, right now? Just trying to understand,
Let me say something. I was going to point out and say that a part of the problem in Texas is going to be we're receiving license to grow and a license to do research. And of course, that's like flipping a coin in the sky to say that what kind of advice and recommendation that we give you. But I'm going to leave this up to them to answer because I know that the TDA have given some particular recommendations about advice to farmers to begin farming. But that's a contrast.
So it's not going to be complicated to get a license. The license to grow hemp in Texas for anyone that qualifies for the criteria that they'll publish is $100. And you can simply go one step is to go to the TDA website and type in hemp, and I believe it might be on the first page. But Commissioner Miller has produced a very thorough video specifically for the farmer who is interested in entering the hemp market in Texas. And there he's giving you some very precise instructions. As we have already discussed before, number one, who is your buyer? And so when we are collecting as community, we are a part of that, defining that supply chain and who that buyer is. But the first step is to go to TDA's website and look at the video, okay? Texas Department of Agriculture, or it's texasagriculture.gov.
Next question. You've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So if we're talking about fiber, so in the previous slides and the previous speakers, we've seen that they can go as high as 40 to 60 pounds per acre. Okay. And if we're talking about, let's say, industrial seeds, anywhere between $4 to, let's say, hopefully around $5 to $6 per pound, then we can go from there at. If we're going at 20 pounds per acre, essentially after all is said and done, on the fiber side, it may mimic cotton. Profits, okay, let's say anywhere between $100 to $400 per acre on the fiber side if you have a buyer for, let's say, greater than 75% of your material, okay? So we're talking about waste and degradation. So there's not a large fiber market right now on the buy side except for biomass. So if we're talking about dividing the plant into sort of three areas, and we can kind of get into that, some of these guys on the CBD side, they'll lop off the top, they'll sell that at a certain, and then sort of you have that side axis, like what Dr. Aruna was talking about, some of those lower quality, the combination of the trim and the other flowers, and then of course you can sell the rest of the biomass. So it does depend, on the overall diversification of your crop. So it's really hard to give it, but it most likely will mimic cotton numbers for the foreseeable future. On the fiber side, on the medical side, or if we're talking about CBD, that's something different, because those prices are compressing rapidly, okay, of course, causing the extraction market, the oil market, to sort of blow up, because that actually extends or it's believed that it extends the shelf life. However, we've tested material, flour and oil, at certain degradation periods at 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months, okay? So we can talk about that offline, but there is a degradation to this material that reduces the bioavailability of the product, and it's something that we all have to take into consideration. So forming a relationship with your lab, for instance, I wish I had better numbers for you, but it really depends on a number of factors, namely if you're talking about where you're growing it. So here in Texas, so I wish I had better numbers for you, yeah.
So from my understanding, looking at a lot of your slides, y'all went with like CO2 extraction. Have y'all looked at any other methods of extraction, whether it be hydrocarbon, whether it be ethanol extraction, whether it be water extraction? And what is the market moving more towards now, like in the other states?
Sure. Okay. So, and I think that Shonda maybe answer this too. So, if you're talking about CO2, so the big ones right now, CO2, ethanol, supercritical CO2. So, supercritical is in between the gaseous and liquid state. Yeah. Go ahead. If you can answer this, this is Nathan. He's with our organization as well. But if we're talking about ethanol and the hydrocarbons, it's going to be very interesting. The extraction side is something to really think about, because again, it's all about yield. Okay. So. Yeah, well, and then kind of adding on to that, if you're scaling your operations, then you're talking about the equipment. So if you're talking about, let's say, centrifugal partition chromatographers, things of that nature, okay, then you have to think about that. So it's essentially the types of solvents you're using, and most importantly, the cost of the machinery as you of course scale up. But always understand, if your machines are down, you're not producing anything. All right, we will understand. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the different types of extractions, one, hydrocarbon, which is a mixture of butane and propane. Those are fairly common. They tend to get a high terpene content. They go at a lower temperature overall. The problems with them is you have to cook the material after you get it. It has to be baked, and then you will not get all of the hydrocarbons out of the product. So this is your shatters, your waxes, a lot of stuff. People are using propane torches to burn when you see that. That's usually the hydrocarbon extractions. They taste a lot pure, but they cannot be cleaned purely, 100%. It cannot happen. We don't have the technology. So that's fairly common. It's the cheapest one to do. Those run from $25,000 to $100,000. Ethanol extractions are fairly common as well. People like those because the ethanol can be taken out with some form of distillation. Otherwise, it gets a broader spectrum, including your plant material, like your I'm blanking on it, starts with pH, but the green stuff, chlorophyll and all that stuff that comes out of it. It takes a lot of stuff out of it, and then you have to get rid of the alcohol. Typically, when you do that, you burn it at a higher temperature. You lose some of your terpene content, but you still get a higher quantity of product through ethanol. Typically, I would imagine why Shonda would go with CO2. You get a cleaner product. You don't have to burn it. The CO2 comes out at room temperature. You just got to let it sit for a little bit, and then it comes out, and you have a clean product. And the marginal cost of that's a little lower, but the upfront cost for a CO2 extractor can be quite expensive. And I'm Nathan. I was a former processor in Colorado, so that's what I did previously.
Hi, Nathan. Do you guys ever use it's like an old kind of Greek kind of extraction method where they ash out the particulates? I was kind of in a conference and I was talking to one of the scientists about that, and they said that's one of the more scalable things for getting all of the cannabinoids out. I don't know if you've worked with that.
I've not
process.
worked with that particularly. I've heard of different extractions from water to vapor to just shaking it because as somebody's had the slides earlier with the trichomes, that's the product that you're looking for primarily. And a lot of that will come out and you'll get a pure product through that. I don't have personal experience with it, so I don't want to tell you anything else.
What are some benefits joining the Texas Hemp Harvesters Association?
Wonderful, great question. First off, we are building the supply chain. So the first benefit to being a part of this is you are going to be a part of the first supply chain for hemp that is developed in the state. The second is we have an extensive resource and experience on our team, and we are adding to it every day. And we ask for your experience as a resource as well. We have some of the most intelligent, most active people across the United States and around the world who have been actively finding solutions for this. So your resource, your network, and then also the resources, again, that we just have available online. So when you join, you become a member. We have a number of things, everything from, points of negotiation for different types of contracts, and then again, building that regional supply chain. So access to see who else is in your area that's doing different things. Yep, and then we will also be adding certification programs for the standard operating procedures, the good manufacturing process. Again, in each area of the supply chain, we have established practices in other industries that we will bring into the hemp industry. So that's another one, the certification program. Mm-hmm. Yes. No, it doesn't exist, or we haven't found it. So if you know it, we would love for you to be a part of us. But the answer is no. The market is heavily swayed towards health and wellness. There are a number of states who have been developing their health and wellness program with CBD and cannabidiol and all the phytocannabinoids. In Texas, we don't have that established market. And the fiber side, the industrial aspect, has to be built. Thank you, Dr. Aruna and Dr. Parts and Dr. Gerard and Prairie View for starting and being the forefront in Texas to build that market. Not that we've found, so we'll tell you true.
Yes. Yes, this is Dr. Elias Jackson of Airform Biopharmaceuticals. How do you propose to protect Prairie View and these farmers from federal oversight?
We'll give that to Dr. Runa.
Okay, and of course, this is not necessarily the representation of the. This is a disclaimer. This is not necessarily the representation of the ideas of Prairie View A&M. But what I believe is that as we said before, this is most likely going to be a second-term presidential outing. If you believe that it is likely that the incumbent, that the current president of the United States is going to be reelected, then it could be highly likely that these issues are going to be attended to. First, we have to understand how money is going to flow in. Okay, once money flows in, then it needs to be protected, because then the investment banks get in, like Goldman, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, those guys. Once they get in and large institutional buys are made, well, then they're going to make sure their money is protected. Then that sort of flows down. Once the money is able to come in, and then we also know what's being created, okay, and especially if we're able to attract military, aerospace, and defense, then that's how it's going to trickle down in terms of protection. There has to be not only compliance and regulatory, but there needs to be protection with the products that are going to be created, namely the intellectual property. How is that going to be shared by the educational institution, by the entity donating the material, and whatever's funding this particular research and development initiative? So to answer your question, how is this going to happen? Well, we have to arrive at what is the value of this, what's the actual supply, but most importantly, what's the demand, and then what is the federal government willing to do to protect the money that's going to enter the industry?
Right. No, my question is, how are you going to protect Prairie View A&M University and these farmers from federal oversight? Because, as we've seen over the past 6 years, and just several weeks ago, federally, they stopped vaping of certain types of vapes, only tobacco. How are you, because remember, we're talking about the valley of death for all these young businessmen and women in here. How are you, if I partner with you, how do you protect me from being raided, from being my production shut down?
Sure.
All this stuff. And do you have any patents on evaluation of cannabis for human consumption and industry? That's my question. How are you going to protect them?
Right. Okay. So no patents. Okay. And on that side, in terms of protecting, it's about self-regulation. So the federal government has the ability. Okay, when there's going to be federal oversight, to come and destroy the property. How you're asking, sir? How are we personally going to protect? Well, then it is through contractual relationships and then transparency with TDA, DSHS, and local and state law enforcement. They have to know what you're growing. And then essentially, very, very similar to what the gentleman who came through USDA, okay, is that there is going to be some sort of regulatory officer that's going to be periodically checking in and understanding what it is that you're growing, and that's how it's going to be protected, from lawsuits from neighboring farms, okay? All right, as well as destruction of your property is something that once it runs hot.
This is very, very important, okay? You all need to understand, this is a great organization and what you're about to embark upon, all right? Yes, we know the money on the other end of this spectrum is huge, from industry to pharmaceuticals. However, the valley of death from now to where we get a federal regulatory standards on how all of these industries operate, you are at huge risk. All you have to do is go online and look at what the FDA and the federal government has done over the past 6 years. They are serious about making this legal. And any bad players in this industry will fall. 2 weeks ago, they came out with a botanical pathway to getting your drugs across the FDA, okay? Your botanical drugs or your botanical formulation. Go to the FDA's website. They came out with it on the 14th of January. Please take a look at that. You have to understand, when you get your investment dollars, you are putting your family's land at risk. You are putting your livelihood at risk. This is not to be played with. When he says due diligence, Due diligence begins with each player associated with the organizations that you partner with. Do you want to be on the front of the Houston Chronicle, this grower associated with drug traffickers? This is a very serious thing. And I take it to my heart because my mother and father graduated from Prairie View. My sister graduated from Prairie View. My whole family, my father, family, cotton farmers, right here in Texas. My father was told, if you don't get good grades, you're going to be back on the cotton farm. So forget about the smoke and mirrors. If you take $10 million, $15 million from an investor and put your family's land up, and the feds come in and say, hold up, we're going to change the 0.3. Well, depending on that contract, you can lose everything, right? Be very, very careful. There are a lot of illegal criminals coming into this market. I was offered $10 million from a California group because they wanted to utilize our pharmaceutical R&D legalization where we can look at everything, any Schedule I drug. They wanted to use it to traffic drugs across state lines. Now, $10 million 6 years ago when we first started out, that was a hard thing to give up. I am telling you, this is something that my company, we're very passionate about. My family went to this school. Please, when he says due diligence, look at the background of everybody you are associated with. And I say this to Prairie View A&M University. You have the opportunity to really set the bar. If you are involved with players of a questionable nature, I can almost guarantee that you will be on the front page of the Houston Chronicle as being associated with drug dealers. Do your due diligence. Beer Farm is open to partner with all of you. We offer federal regulatory oversight. We have the only patent for the evaluation of cannabis and cannabinoid-based products, federal. So if you work with us, you ain't got nothing to worry about. So be very careful. I've heard a lot of good things, and I've heard some questionable things. I had the fortunate to meet this gentleman right here, who's actually in the industrial realm. He says quality. Quality is the key. You're going to hear people say, industry, one thing, medicinal, another. That's crap, okay? Quality will determine whether a 2x4 lasts 2 years or 20 years. Quality is going to be your key. Testing is going to be in the industrial side as well as the medicinal side. Be very, very careful because you are putting your family's lives at risk. You're putting the property that your great-grandfathers gave to you. Be extremely careful. But once again, I commend Prairie View and everyone here. You're setting the bar, and we look forward to working with you. Great panel. But forget about the smoke and mirrors. If you do not have federal oversight protection from this point to where it's federally legal, you are at risk. Forget what anyone says to you, because I'm hearing it every day, everywhere I go. I've met with players from Israel, players from Connecticut, players from Canada, coming into the hemp business. I want your property. I want your land. Do a deal with me. Heard that story before. And I say this to Prairie View A&M University. My family has been associated with this university for years. You saved my family's life, took us out of the cotton field, okay? Be careful who you associate with, because it can have long-lasting ramifications. Thank you.
Shall I add something for doctor's comment? Yes, this is where we need research on this. And in fact, I have 10 years experience working with FDA regulating herbal dietary supplement products. And I have gone through all these illegal stuff, and we have successfully managed to protect ourselves and help FDA to make the guidelines for wrongdoing in the herbal dietary supplement products. So we have a great team. We don't worry about these things.
Can we have some more questions, please, sir? Can we have some more questions, please? We have other people. It's getting kind of late.
Of course, of course. Yes. True, true.
Well, I want to thank Shonda for your question earlier about do we have, buyers? That's a great question. Being from Oregon, born and raised, and Dr. Runas, I want to thank you for our conversation last night. I agree with everybody here. What you must know is it's about quality over quantity. Like in Oregon last year when we had the hailstorm and it destroyed crops. You had farmers, 5-year generations of farmers that committed suicide. And I have a family that we grow cannabis in Washington and then hemp in Oregon. And it's very important, like these soil testing bags, you can probably get them from places, but it's very important for you to test your soil. And I want to piggyback from Dr. Rennes, we spoke last night, whether you're having mass land and you want to do biomass or you want to do industrial, start small. You can get a greenhouse. It doesn't have to be the size of a shoebox, but it can be something that's relevant for you to test your product and your soil, because there's things like the cocoa blends that we talked about last night, which are the coconut shavings. You could do hydroponics, you can do aeroponics, but it's better to be safe. You can start small and think of it like a university, freshman class, sophomore class, junior, senior, and then you get to be the valedictorian. It's important for you to test your soil to make sure that quality is there. You don't want to have the wrong pH. So I wanted to just applaud the panel and, being from Oregon and coming here to start a farm myself. I'm going to be doing some industrial farming with the greenhouses, but it's very important to take heed to these wonderful experts because you don't want to have the soil go wrong and then your crop is done. In Oregon, we have a lot of rain there, and like we don't have here with the trees where you can catch all those bad things. You could have an apple orchard 5 miles up, and that cloud brings those bad things over to your land. So a greenhouse is perfect. It doesn't have to be the size of a shoebox. It could be the size of whatever you want, but you control your quality there. So thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for last night for telling me, and thank you, everybody, for all your expertise.
We have one last question. It's actually after 3 o'clock. Let me have him have this question, and we're gonna close on my ship.
Thank you. Just thank you so much, everybody, for your time today. Just really one quick question. Will Prairie View be doing all the research on campus, or will you be piloting with other farmers in different areas because of the different geological locations of the state? Will you be doing other research in other places besides on campus?
Yes, I agree with your question. As Shonda said, Texas is a big state. Probably can fit 6 other states in here. Okay, so if you look at Texas, we have about 10 or so ecological zones. That's a lot. And half of the state, East Texas, is wet. The other part is dry. The soils are completely different. We have, out of the orders of soil that we have in the United States, I think we have 7 or more of them just in Texas alone. So that's a whole lot of ground to cover in terms of different soil, different growing zones and stuff like that. Now, but as a university, we also have to accept that, we don't have unlimited resources, right? And so you got to start from somewhere. So our plan is to start on campus. Now, will we branch out and do things in the counties? I bet we will. Because currently we have projects that we work, in counties where we are. So it is not off limits, but for a start, we'll start from here.
I'm just going to tack on to that. So while Prairie View has their large programs and exceptional programs that will cover a lot of things, there are other institutions in the state. Texas State University is planning to do a statewide study with their different institutions. So, and I know that they are also planning to, utilize other groups. So if, where we can plug into Prairie View and utilize and support their group, I think that's the most important thing. And there will probably be other opportunities throughout the state also.
Thank you. Why don't we give them a hand of applause? It's after 3 o'clock. I was going to actually just give the dean opportunity to make a closing comment, and I won't say what I was going to say. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm looking at Rosina. Thank you. Hold on. Let me give thanks. Thank everybody for the work they did. This didn't just happen because we were talking, but because of all the work that was done based on the team, the CAP, and others as well. So we thank everybody for the work they did today.
Well, I just want to piggyback on that and say thank you again for a really historic day, because this is just the start of a long journey of discovery. So we've got much to learn, and thank you all for the opportunity to be vigilant and cognizant of the fact that compliance, believe it or not, we've got many layers. We're a state institution. We've got the TAMIS system. We've got state regulations. We've got federal regulations. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of bureaucracy we have to go through to get anything done. And as someone said, resources are scarce. So even though we are a relatively large university and college, our resources to do so are scarce. But at the end of the day, I think it's about partnerships and relationships and trust. And that is so very important in terms of an emerging niche industry in this great state. So we have tremendous assets, a deep bench of expertise, including all the way from Oregon and the other states where they have a lot of experience. So we thank everybody for coming and attending, and we look forward to more such workshops, not just here on the Prairie View campus, but at other universities that have similar research. So thanks to our partners in the form of the Texas Hemp Harvesters Association and everybody else present. Thanks, Clarence.
And all of you received an evaluation. I was just reminded to have you to complete your evaluations and turn them in to us as well. And also I have someone's phone. Someone has misplaced their cell phone. I have it here, so I'm not going to take it home with me. I'm going to leave it here. But I have the phone, so if anyone's looking for the phone, I have it at the current time. We're adjourned.